In this week's episode, we meet a phenomenal young leader who is determined to change the way society looks at disability.
There's something deeply problematic about whose bodies we validate.
At the age of 2, he developed a rare genetic condition that severely affected his muscles. Edward Ndopu had no option but to use a wheelchair, meaning he would never know the joy of running around freely like most children. But in later years, Edward became a strong voice that fights for the rights of disabled people. At the moment, he is studying abroad and also speaks at international conferences. Well, this week we are here in Ottawa, Canada, to find out what Edward plans to do with his new knowledge when he gets back home. Edward Ndopu, born and raised in the Windhoek of the 1990s.
He was a very special child for me, right from the beginning.
But when Edward turned 2, the writing was on the wall. Something wasn't right.
He walked in a particular way. He was like falling from side to side when he was walking, and he was definitely struggling to walk. So I took him into the doctors and the diagnosis was made.
It turned out baby Edward had spinal muscular atrophy, an illness that severely affects muscles and neurons. Medical experts predicted he wouldn't reach the age of 5.
Oh, I was devastated. I was nervous, I was scared. I didn't know what the future held. I used to think a lot about years to come. I was very scared for him, and my marriage had fallen apart, so I was a single parent already. Many things came to mind. When he grows older, who's going to pick him up, and all the kinds of things.
But Edward's deteriorating body stood the test of time. He celebrated his 5th birthday, and his mother was encouraged to start preparing for his primary education.
I was convinced that it's mainstream schooling or nothing. I wouldn't have him in a special school just because he cannot walk.
But many mainstream schools didn't have the capacity to take disabled children.
It was an uphill situation. I knocked on many doors. I went to quite a number of schools, and that was in Windhoek where we lived at the time.
Only when Edward turned 7 did he finally secure a place at a mainstream school.
Well, Edward was such a sparkling young child at the time, that the whole school just took to him. He had so many friends. He never ran out of friends to push him around in his wheelchair. And of course the proviso from the school was that someone has to go with him to school in order to attend to his physical needs, as his body was weakening by the day.
In 2000, Edward and his family, who'd been exiled in Windhoek, relocated to Cape Town. By then, his younger brother had also started school and quickly became his pillar of strength.
They were best buddies in the sense of the word, and his brother actually is a very caring brother who would assist him with his daily needs. At Cambridge Primary School, it became very obvious Edward is he's got a very creative streak about him. He started participating in all sorts of things.
I think at some point I wanted to become a musician. Later on I grew up and I wanted to become an artist. So generally speaking, I think I've always tapped into the creative side of myself.
Young as he was, Edward started thinking deeply about issues that affect society.
I remember sort of thinking to myself that the world is constructed to meet the needs of a particular person, of a particular body. You know, I would look at a staircase and I would often wonder, why is it that I need to travel, you know, a great distance in order to access a ramp?
But it was South Africa's education system in particular that he strongly questioned.
I just felt as though I, as a student with a disability who had difficulty writing sometimes, long essays, that I was being graded upon, you know, my ability to churn out assignments, you know, to be able to write long essays, as opposed to the content that I produced. I began to realize that there's something deeply problematic about whose bodies we validate.
And that's how Edward Ndopu became aware of the tough reality disabled people face in South Africa daily. But young as he was, he knew he needed to help find solutions. After the break, from a little boy with frustrating physical limitations, Edward Ndopu takes his vision to the world.